All right, one sector that actually I think maintained a fairly good relationship with the Labor government, though didn't get necessarily a lot of wins, was the business sector. The biggest business advocacy group in the country is Business New Zealand, and its Executive Director, Chief Executive Kirk Hope, joins us now. Kirk, good morning to you.
Morning, Sean.
We've got change. There's no doubt this has been an election, and Chris Trotter earlier today on the show said this is like in the last 30, 40 years, one of the biggest changes we've seen in government in New Zealand. Is it a change that business will welcome, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you look at what's been negotiated through the two coalition agreements, the short-term 100-day plan, there's a lot of stuff in there for business, particularly around the industrial relations space, which was a very, that was a pretty challenging
You went to great lengths. You went all the way to Geneva to try and stop that so-called fair trade agreement, didn't you?
Yeah.
Fair pay agreement, sorry.
Fair pay agreements, yeah, we got that up in Geneva. They basically said, because there wasn't legislation in place, that the government should go away and work with, the CTU and Business New Zealand and come up with something that didn't breach international law. But they ignored that. Helpful.
All right. What does this mean for business confidence, a change of government? Is there a wait and see what's the financial package going to say we're still in trouble? Or do you think it will generally lead to a lightening in mood or an improvement in mood?
Well, I think probably what you've seen post-election is already a bit of a bump in business confidence. But the reality is what's going to make the biggest difference to business confidence is business owners, people running businesses, being able to see a clear policy pathway to future demand. So what are the policies which are going to have an impact on people's day-to-day ability to spend, purchase things? So a couple of observations around that. I think keeping the labour market reasonably flexible is really critical. So if people are out of work, they're able to easily move and get into work. So if you have too much restriction in that space, it doesn't really serve anybody, and it usually creates inflationary pressure. So I think, what business is really looking for, they've got a pretty clear pathway through that, that 100-day program, the 100-point economic plan of nationals, plus the other stuff that's in the agreements, to sort of see that in a way that perhaps we hadn't seen for some time.
All right. The re-emphasis in terms of the Reserve Bank Act on price stability, does that have a real effect on business?
Well, yeah, because the reality is if interest rates are high, your cost of capital is up, and if your customers are sort of slightly in decline, that means you've got narrower margins, and that means less profitability. So it is really critically important that the Reserve Bank's sole focus be on inflation. I think that's a smart step. And by doing that, you usually will deal with unemployment, frankly. If you're managing inflation to between the mid-band, so that's 2%, you're likely to have stimulatory employment policies, right?
All right, we've got a new Minister of Immigration, Erica Stanford. She seemed to be talking the same language as you people did. And once again, this is a labour market supply issue, immigration settings and policies. Does work need to be done there to get the economy cranking along better?
I think there's a couple of areas within the agreements which I think are quite important. So just taking Erica's portfolio, Erica's portfolios, immigration and education. So they are, two parts of, if you like, crudely put, that's the labour market supply chain right there. So that's really helpful to have those portfolios matched together to understand what the future of the labour market will look like, and whether you need to change the settings for immigration. So if you see a massive drop in, let's just say, kids coming into school between 15 and 17, or kids not coming out with NCEA, you know that they're not necessarily going to be ready for the workforce. What do you need to do by way of further training for them, and then what might the skills be that you need to bring into the country to make up for that shortfall? So that's smart. There's some other things like in the New Zealand First Agreement, there's an essential worker skills visa. And I think, again, that's about smart future planning. We had that sort of thing with COVID, where you were able to bring certain types of people into the country at certain times. So those things, I think, are quite a shift in the way that I think this government will look at the immigration system.
Mm. Is there anything that isn't covered in the coalition agreement that is a priority for business?
I mean, I think probably one area where particularly larger energy-intensive trade-exposed businesses would be wanting to keep an eye on was probably climate change policy and what happens around the world with climate change policy and New Zealand's role in that.
It's hardly mentioned in the coalition agreement.
Exactly.
Those policies aren't dropped, they are just no longer a priority, would be my read of it. And that may be reflecting a global trend, Kirk.
Yeah, it could be. And again, I think so the question is, what does that mean for businesses that are, energy intensive and trade exposed? Is it good? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What happens to the businesses? So one thing that I would probably see coming out of that is if all things remained equal, and the ETS was the main tool, you're going to need some sort of transition process for particularly large industrial emitters in ways that our trading counterparts are supporting their industries. So I think that's going to be quite critical.